Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for today. Hopefully, you all can see my screen and hear me all right, so we can get going. This is the third webinar in our series for the OpenText D2 Life Sciences solution. So today we're covering the Research and Development module from OpenText. So we're going to talk a little bit today about who FME is, but we will keep that short, and we'll jump into the overview of OpenText D2 Life Sciences R&D module. And then we're going to show a demonstration of this module. So I'm Larissa Primavera, Sales Director for FME US. And with us today, we have Frank Dentrone, who's the President of FME US, and Manuela Bernhard, who's one of our managing consultants here. So a little bit of housekeeping. We have you in listen-only mode, just so you're aware. And then if you have questions at the end of this session, you can certainly send them to the chat directly to the organizer, and we'll read them aloud and answer them accordingly. And also, the session today is being recorded, so you can go back and view again or share with your colleagues. So again, we did want to tell you a little bit about FME. So we are your partner for digital transformation, and we focus a lot in life sciences, hence we are showing the OpenText D2 Life Sciences Suite today, and industrial manufacturing. We do say more because we have our product migration center, which is cross-industry. So we work a little bit with platform for OpenText Documentum as well. We were founded in 1995. We have over 190 employees now. And I mentioned we're from FME US, so we also have offices throughout Germany and in Romania. So that Romanian team is our product development, product support. Some of our focuses are ECM, being OpenText Documentum, our main focus, business intelligence, cloud big data, social collaboration, and custom software development. So we do like to our customers to say, and about FME, it's you we love to work with, but it's FME you love to work with. So that's really our goal. We strive to have be successful and have you really like to work with us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Frank to get into the overview of the R&D module.
Sure. Thank you, Larissa. So my name is Frank Dentrone, and you gave me a brief intro. So thank you, Larissa, for doing that. So I'm going to give you a little highlight of where of the R&D module, but let me do a quick little summary in terms of the overall solution, the Documentum Life Science solution. So OpenText, for those who are not, as familiar, they've been servicing the life sciences industry for many years around content management or enterprise content management, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 plus years. And from the solution that we're discussing today, from life sciences suite, there's 100%. So top 10 pharmas are leveraging OpenText Documentum. Some good facts. 95% of the top 50 pharmas are using OpenText Documentum, and lastly, 90% of the top 10 biotech are using OpenText Documentum. So this kind of gives you some substance on what the industry thinks of the platform and how it benefits them, in terms of their business process and what they're trying to achieve as an organization around their enterprise content management platform. So this is just a quick little highlight, just kind of to highlight where we've come from, or we've come a long way in terms of the Documentum portfolio, the suite. Those are, have the background or have the historical familiarity with the platform. You could see, you have the Documentum webtop client. Now we have what we'll talk about and see today, the Life Sciences Suite founded on the D2 framework, prepackaged solution. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, next you have the cloud or the life sciences, the Leap Express interface to the platform, which can work, hand in hand depending on the use case, on the mobile devices with a responsive design approach. So we really come a long way in terms of enterprise content management and the portfolio that we're going to speak about and show you today. So this is a slide that we touched on throughout the webinar series. So for today, this has all the solutions or modules, if you will, across. We touched on some of them already, and today we're going to focus on the research and development module. but as you'll see underneath, the application stack on the top, you have a variety of industry best practice or services that are part of the solution. Similarly, or for example, the DI EDM reference model or TMF reference models, those are based on industry best practices and standards. So the solution is embracing that approach. And those industry standards are available, online as public information. And beneath the stack, there's a number of services that are part, including, at the bottom, FME, our skill set in terms of implementation of the solution, as well as, accelerating customers in terms of onboarding your current, where you are currently to the portfolio of the life sciences suite. And then, this just kind of calls out what we're talking about. So the R&D module. So here is just a briefing, kind of high-level summary of what we have, what we're going to talk about today or demo today. It's an out-of-the-box solution where you have the ability to kind of manage, create, review, and approval all your regulatory submission-related documentation. So we're going to go through the solution stack in the demo, but it's going to show and massage all the behavior in the R&D module. And we're going to walk through doc creation, review, and approval process, and things of that nature, including kind of touch on master data in terms of products. And you'll see this through the demo, but we're going to touch on the data model with the registration forms and massage that behavior and walk you through how that information is managed within the life sciences suite or the R&D module. Here's just a depiction of the general features of the solution. These are the things that are based off best practice, pre-configured configurations around workflow, lifecycle, permission control, so access rights, also the interface, the workspace, how that experience, the user experience is behaving based on roles, so it's very role-based. Here's just kind of a short list of the roles. There's some additional ones across the different modules. And then from a DIA reference model, the framework leverages this sort of reference model approach to store documents in a particular hierarchical perspective with a business context. And then there's just an example. We have clinical, you have biopharmaceutical study reports, and then bioavailability and report bodies. So this is just kind of giving you a depiction of what that structure would look like, and depending on the types of documents that you're creating and the business function, in addition to clinical, like safety or regulatory administrative documents, that hierarchy is prepackaged and as things get filed in the appropriate location. So here's a little bit of a repeat, a little bit here, but this mentions more of those Reg Forms. So here you'll see we have documents that, the goal here is to have documents that are approved, that are submission ready. So there is a workflow for those that are familiar with the process flow. You have documents that get created from templates. The templates are typically, customer-specific templates that have the styles, headers, footers, styles, things that are going to help in the submission process, or have documents that are in what I call submission-ready format. So templates is a starting point, but also in the review and approval process, there's a good workflow that has a format review process built in that's out of the box. And typically that step in the process is where you have your, let's say, the folks that are going to influence the submission, process, generating your published output for your submittals to the regulatory agencies. That workflow really helps and assists in that particular business process. And I think I highlighted a little bit the Reg Forms. I'm going to show a slide on what that looks like, but around how you define your products, how you register your regulatory applications, your clinical studies or non-clinical studies, and there's additional forms that captures all that master data that gets associated to your documents, having that rich data model for finding document search and more importantly, retrieval. So here's that example that I was mentioning around the R&D module, the master data, and there's a variety of registration forms. So this is just a screenshot of the model where you have kind of at the foundation, you have your product definition where you define your products. Then from that data layer, you kind of spawn off to non-clinical studies or your clinical studies. Similarly, would be generated based off of the product definition. So this product what studies do I have, and then your drug projects is a layer between your regulatory applications, and we'll see some examples of that. And then once you have your regulatory application, that's typically where you register an application for or an approval in a particular region or geography. And then within that regulatory application, you have a variety of regulatory activity or submission sequences. So this is sort of just a high level how you can manage all that master data and correlate that to your documentation. And this, what I usually say is this is where documentation kind of meets RIM. So a lot of RIM or regulatory information management that's part of the solution on top of your documentation. Yeah, I want to segue to the demo. Just want to keep the slides brief, but we wanted to segue now, Larissa, into the demo, and I'll be around to field any questions that may come up, after the demo.
Okay, and I think from there I take over, so I hope you can hear me okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thanks Frank, thanks Larissa for the introduction to the R&D module and what capabilities it offers. So I think we've seen a lot of the information already on the slides, and we want to now jump in and actually have a look at the live system to show some of the items that you have seen or heard about in the past few minutes. So I'm gonna start by logging in as a regulatory manager and point out some items as that user. Okay, so as Frank was mentioning, is we have all kinds of R&D domains covered within the R&D solution, and each of those domains has a separate area where they can store and manage their documents. So, for example, we have an area for clinical documents, where do we have the regulatory documents. And just to give a few examples, as I'm logged in as a regulatory manager, I cannot see the full photo structure, but I have a pretty good overview over what is there. And so each of those domains have their sets of user roles. So, for example, for clinical, I will have user roles for authors, reviewers, approvers, and managers, and the same I will have for non-clinical, quality, regulatory, labeling, and so on. So each of those areas can manage their documents separately from each other. But there will be overlap in the permissions. For example, regulatory publisher user will have access to all the approved documents to be able to pull them together to a regulatory submission. Now, another item that Frank had pointed out is the item of the registration forms. So for a lot of the documents that are stored in the system, there is a set of master data necessary to fill the properties for those specific documents. So for that purpose, D2 Life Science Solution offers the concepts of registration forms. So those are just contentless objects pretty much that are stored within the repository and that offer you to gather all necessary information for those specific configuration items. So for example, you can see here we have a product library. So those are specific product configurations that will be created by product manager users. So I can just open the properties just to give you an overview. So for example, for products, I can store information such as the compound ID, chemical name, drug substance, generic name, the different trade countries with their trade names, the indications. And a lot of that information will then be automatically carried over to the documents that are created for that specific purpose. So we do have projects, then we have quality projects. So more specific classification based on the products to make them available for the project area. Then we do have clinical trials, so we can create the necessary configurations for clinical studies that will be used for study documents that will be stored within the life science repository. So also there we can have just a quick glance on what information will be available for clinical studies. So also there it will pretty much inherit a lot of the information from the product and also from the quality project. So it uses both of those information, and that's where the indication, dosage form, dosage strength come from. But then there will be an additional set of information that can be stored per clinical trial, like which study phase it belongs to and which subgroup this belongs to. So also there, as Frank mentioned, there is a classification for the document in the background. So all the R&D documents have a taxonomy defined in the background, which is a 3-level classification of group, subgroup, and artifact. And based on this classification, the system behavior is configured. So it might be that there are different properties pages displayed in the user interface, or that there are different workflows are available depending on which artifact a document is associated with. And we will see this with an example in just a few minutes. But to go back to the clinical trials, also here we associate that trial to a specific group and subgroup. So it will only be available for documents within that categorization. And I have some additional information that I can specify here as well. Now, one of the key purposes for this solution is to get all the submission relevant documents together that belong to a regulatory application or to a specific submission. So Frank had mentioned that we can register regulatory applications within this system. So also here, what is behind this is a registration form where we can gather all the information for a specific regulatory application, and then we are able in the next steps to associate our documents with this application, so to allow the publishers to pull all the information together in a simple way. So I logged in as a regulatory manager, so I actually want to create a new regulatory application to walk through the process once. So I'm not talking a lot about the D2 essentials or about the basic layout, but please feel free to look at any of our old recorded webinars to get a better overview or some more introduction to the D2 basics. But as it's a matter of time, let's just focus on the regulatory application here. So with the creation profiles in the role that I'm in, the user that is logged in the system has the ability to create different kinds of documents or registration forms in the system. So as this specific users, I could, for example, also create new products and new quality projects. But for this example, we want to create a regulatory application. So in the next screen, I will get presented with the properties that can be associated with such a form. So here we, based on what I had pre-selected before, I already have the R&D project and the R&D product pre-selected. And there's some information that gets filled automatically that we will see in a minute based on what is selected here. But now I can provide in a specific description for this application. And if I already have it available, I can enter the application number, or I can save this until later. I can select the application status, then the geographic region, and the health authority, the application type. Now, all of this information that you see here in those pick lists comes out of dictionaries and taxonomies that are stored in the background. So you saw, for example, when I selected a region, I only had a subset of countries available. And based on the countries, I only had a subset of health authorities available. So there's a preset of dictionaries and taxonomies that comes packaged with the solution. But as part of the project of adapting to this solution, all these lists would be reviewed and adjusted to your specific needs and to your business processes. Now, when I look in the next tab, I see that the project and product information was pre-selected. And I can see drug substances. I could add some additional information here, and also the drug names. So what I will receive here as a pre-selection is the information that was already pre-filled in the product and projects. So it might be that were multiple entries available in the product and projects, and here I can select which one actually will apply to this regulatory application. And then I can finish the creation once I provided all necessary information. Typical to a Documentum system, everything will be highlighted with a red asterisk that is mandatory, whether it is in a registration form or specific to a document. And then I can see that a new regulatory application was created in the system. And I can have here a quick view of the properties. So I can have a quick review. Okay. Additional options that I have here is specifically when I also use the SSV module, which is installed in this environment as well, I could actually upload a published submission. Oops, I didn't want to click that. We don't need to do that. We'll save this for the SSV demo at a later point of time. But what I also can do is I can register specific submissions with the application as well. So I can have one or multiple submissions associated with it for these specific purposes, and can then associate my documents to this submission. So I can specify a submission number, can verify that this number is unique, can select the submission type and the status. And also here, as you can see, it's inheriting all the information already from my regulatory application, so there's only a minimal set of information that additionally needs to be provided. Okay, what we also saw here is it created a folder structure. So specifically for our regulatory application, it made sure that the product and region folder is created. And now it created another subfolder for our submission that we have available in the system. So now what I want to do next is I actually want to log in as a clinical author and walk you through the creation of some documents, and we will get back to the application topic after that. So now I'm just choosing the clinical area as one of the examples on what the user interface will look like for an author user. Just one moment here. There's some problem with the resolution here. Okay. Let me just log out and log back in. It seems the resolution is a bit off. Okay, that's better. I was missing those buttons earlier. So now I'm in a typical contributor workspace. So there's a welcome page that offers a quick access to some of the functions. So I can create an input directly from here or see my workflow inbox tasks. And then I have a browse workspace, a browse area where I have the folder structure available and where I do my main document management activities to create and import documents and to work through them through the workflow. And if I'm involved in any workflow task, I have a specific workflow workspace that I can use for that. So let me start and import a document. So one item for clinical documents is that for clinical and also for non-clinical documents, we have study and non-study related documents. And for those, also the screens in the user interface are differently depending on whether a clinical trial needs to be selected or not. And further, we have this whole group, subgroup, artifact classification that we mentioned. Just to show you an example here, this is an extract from the D2 system, from the life science solution for clinical, where you can see the list of groups, subgroups, and artifacts. And also what is in those lists, what's pretty interesting is that you can associate each of those artifacts to specific workflows. And we will see this in the user interface, like which workflows will be available for the specific artifact and whether an electronic signature is required. So there's quite some configuration possibility here to adjust it to your specific business needs. So in the first example, I want to load a protocol document. This is a study-related document. And I have to select the artifact here on what kind of document this is. In our case, I want to store this as a protocol. If this is a study-related document, I will have to select the clinical trial. So in the first step, I have to select the product. And then the clinical trials will be available. In our case, it was only one clinical trial. So it pre-filled the group and subgroup based on the clinical trial and the artifact name based on what I had selected during creation. Now, based on my selections, a lot of the information, like here, the study information, will already be pre-filled. So there's only a minimum of information that has to be provided. As I'm importing an already existing document, I have also the ability to say I want to keep my original document name, file name, and store it in the title field. The actual document name within the life science solution is usually auto-generated, as we will see in the next step. Just one note here, so I could already here assign the document to a regulatory application and submission, but this is optional in this step and can be done later on as well. So I'm just gonna move on with the creation. Okay, so the document is being uploaded. So what I can see now is it automatically placed it in the folder that belongs to my clinical trial underneath my product within the clinical area. And an auto naming was applied containing the artifact name, the clinical trial name, and then an automated document number, which gets counted up with each new document that gets created in the system. This is the default naming that comes out of the box, but customers are encouraged to come up with their own auto naming rules to best support their business processes. So I can also see it got the version 0.1 and was imported in status draft. So automatically, when a document gets uploaded to a system, PDF version of the document gets generated. And what this will allow us to do is to actually see a document preview within the application. So this will be directly generated once the document is loaded. And I can also here see the properties of my document. Now, what I had mentioned earlier is that the artifact defines what, for one thing, what the properties page looks like, but for the other thing, which workflows are available. So we see that this document only has a restricted list of workflows available. So it has a review and approval or the review format approval. Frank had mentioned it a little bit on his slides, but what the difference is between those two workflows is that the format approval has one additional review step before the actual approval of the document, which allows a group of format reviewers to make sure that the document is pretty much submission ready from its layout, from its formatting. And then also we have a collaborative editing. This will not change the lifecycle status of the document at all, but it just allows a team of users to collaboratively work on the document and contribute contents to the document. So I want to route this document through review and approval. And based on the configuration in the system, some users are already pre-selected here because these are all the members within a specific group that was pre-configured. For the reviewers, there was nothing pre-configured, so I have to select them manually. And additionally, I could add some additional information that will appear in the workflow tasks. I could add some additional attachments if they're helpful for the document, or I could set a follow-up date to send additional notifications. I will send this document into the workflow. And what will happen next is that the reviewer user is the first one to receive the workflow task in the inbox to review the document. So when I go here, I also have those widgets available to provide me of an overview over different aspects of the document. So in this widget, for example, I can see the running workflows for this specific document. So I will log in now as the clinical reviewer user so we can progress with this workflow. Okay, so we see the workspace looks very similar to that from the author user, but this user group does not have a quick button for creating and importing documents, as this group is purely focused on reviewing the documents and promoting them in the workflow. And I can see my workflow task list that I have received my task. And for my document that was routed, I can see the task notes, which was the text that was entered during the start of the workflow. And I can see the PDF preview for the document, and I have access also to the attributes of the document. In case the document was a virtual document, so it is supported to create virtual document structures, I could also access the full document structure here as well. And I can see also all the audit trail in case I want to trace back on what has happened with the document. So based on this information that I have available here, I can decide whether I have comments for the document, whether any changes are required, or whether this document can just be passed on in the workflow. So due to the time, I will just review without comments, which is pretty much passing the document on to the approver user. If I would review with comments, it would go back to the author user, so the author can review the comments and decide if they or what action is required before passing it again into the workflow. Okay, so I just have to confirm the task. And now this workflow task is completed. Oh, this was the one. And I can see that my workflow status has progressed to for approval. So the next step will be to log in as the approver user and to actually approve the document. So for this user, the appearance of the user interface will be very similar to the review user. Also, this user is focused on the workflow tasks in the system. And I can see the user has received the workflow task in the inbox. And also here, the same information is available as before, the preview as well as the properties. And now this user can again decide whether to approve or reject the document. So rejecting will also go back to the author, and approve will place an electronic signature on the document because this specific artifact requires an electronic signature. So if we go back to this sheet, there are a lot of artifacts that do out of the box not require a signature, but for several others, this is a requirement so that the signature screen will come up. So I will log in with my test account, and I can select the justification, the intention here as well. Oops. Of course, I have to type it correctly. And now with this step, the approval process is complete. And when I go back to my author view, I will see that the document has gone to approved state. Oops, that's the So here we go. Now, when I go back to my document preview, we see that during the approval process, a new rendition is being generated for the document. And now what we can see in this rendition, so I'm able to maximize just by double-clicking on it, is that a signature page was added at the end of the document with the approval information. Also, this layout of the signature pages or of any watermarks in the system is configurable as part of the life science solution and can be adjusted to your specific business needs. Now that I have an approved document, what I actually want to show is I can associate this document now to the submission and make it available there. So for this, I selected the item to add it to a registered submission. And I receive a screen where I have for my specific product that is relevant for this document, I see all applications listed that I can associate the document with. And if there are submissions for this document, I will also have them available and can directly associate it to the submission as well. So I can actually associate it to one or multiple applications or submissions at once. I'm just going to confirm this selection. And now this will update the properties of the document. So this information will now be available within the document properties in this tab, regulatory information. But also it will create a relationship to the applications and to the submissions that I had selected. So when I now look at the associated relations for my document, I can see here at the bottom that it is associated to 2 regulatory applications and to 1 regulatory submission. This relation is both ways. So when I log in as a regulatory user, I will see which documents are associated. So let's do that next to show you what this looks like. So I'm logging in as a publisher user. Oops. So this is my workspace for the regulatory publisher. And I can now navigate to my specific application or submission. So when I go to the regulatory application library, I have all my applications and submissions listed here. So for example, I can go to the submission. And then under Relations, I will be able to see all the documents that were associated with this submission. So in our case, that's the clinical document that we just created. In all of those views, I also have the ability always to adjust columns or to export, for example, to an Excel layout. So I see this here for my submission, or if I go a level higher onto the regulatory application. This is an application that was already previously existing. I can also see here all the documents that are associated to that regulatory application. So this was one that was previously created and which already had 2 clinical and 1 regulatory, actually 1 labeling document associated. Now, just to give one more example, I want to create one more document as a regulatory author. No, actually labeling. Sorry about that. So because when I create documents as a regulatory or labeling user, the majority of the documents requires that you directly enter the application information when the document gets created. So we're just going to have a quick look at one of those labeling documents to show what this looks like. So this can also just give you another overview on what the different domains look like. So from the concept, all the domains are very similar. We have this concept of group, subgroup, and artifact of the taxonomy and the different properties, pages, and workflows that are associated with it. So for example, now I'm a labeling author user. So I will also here again have the ability to create different kinds of documents. I can create labeling documents, but as this user, I could also create regulatory administrative documents. But for now, I want to create labeling documents. And here, just to show you the examples that we have the difference between application labeling and core labeling documents, which are available out of the box. And also this, again, are the different artifacts that I have available from which I can select the document. So in our example, for example, I can create an annotated label document. And this document will require that I specify an application directly during the creation of the document. So also here you can see there's already a lot pre-filled. So based on my selection and the creation screen, it knows the artifact and could pre-fill the group subgroup based on that. Then I have the product information. There's nothing special here, but I could add information here if needed. But here, as it is an application labeling document, you see the red asterisks. We have to, during creation, already have to provide the regulatory application. So also here, I can create one or multiple of my applications, and the system will pre-fill as much information as it can based on what was stored in the original registration forms. So all those screens always tie back to the registration forms that are globally managed by the manager groups. And so I can create this document. And also here, I will be able to see under the relations that it was associated with the regulatory application and with the submission. So this information is available here. And also what I can see here, as I haven't pointed that out earlier, is in which folder paths this document was created. Now, as those are in documents or application-specific documents, they're actually stored out of the box in a folder specific for the regulatory application. So we can see two folder paths were created. It's associated with the document to two applications, which have product, region, and then application name as the structure. And now this document will also be immediately available for the publisher user as well to see through the relationship when looking based on or starting from the application or submission, so that there's always a global overview of the documents that belong together. So all the different domains will pretty much behave in the same way to create documents and either immediately or later associate them to one or more applications and submissions to gather all documents in one place. So we walked through the creation, import, and the workflow of the documents. One last item I want to point out before we close this demo is the search capability. So D2 allows for a very complex filtered search in the system. So when I look for a specific search term, it will go across all the documents and registration forms. It will search in the attributes and in the content of the files. And what the nice thing is for the users is that it will generate a faceted search. And also this is configurable based on the different object types. But here for the different attributes for the document, it will list all values that are used within the search result list and will allow you to drill down within this search result list. So for example, we can say, okay, we only want to see documents in approved status, and it will refilter the list down to only those documents. So we can see here also that a filter was applied, so I can narrow it down. Or I can remove the filter again and do a different filtering to just look at all documents associated to a specific product, for example. So I can do a multi-step drill down here, so I could have a long list of attributes listed here to drill down one by one and narrow down my search result list to what is really needed. So this is a very powerful search for the users to help them to easily get to the documents that they are looking for. Other than that, what I unfortunately won't have the time to talk about in detail is the virtual document capabilities. Out of the box, there's a virtual document from clinical side, the CSR that comes along with the product that allows you to create a clinical study report with all of its components. But you have always the ability to configure your own virtual document templates and virtual document structures in the system to allow users to fill in the leaves, the bits and pieces as they go through their business process. Okay, I think with that I'm at the end of the demo what I wanted to show. So I think we can go over to any questions.
Thank you, Manuela. It was a great demo. We wanted to just go over a couple of things. Let me switch back. You can start, absolutely, as Manuela mentioned, putting questions in the chat if you do have them. So there's a section down below. You can send a question directly, and we will answer them for you. And we did also want to mention that the series will continue. There's 2 additional modules that we have not done a separate webinar for, which is the OpenText D2 electronic trial master file, as well as the submission store and view. Okay, and with that, you can put questions in if you do have them. We have one that did come in. It's so you had mentioned the D2 Life Science Express. Can you give a little more detail on that?
So Frank, do you want to talk to that one?
Sure, I can field that. So Life Science Express, so that's based on the LEAP platform, which is a cloud native solution. So that the LEAP Express, Life Sciences Express, is sitting literally in the cloud. So it's a cloud integration, which orchestrates the connection, if you will, to your Documentum, the Life Sciences Suite repository. So for example, if you want to upload a document, through LEAP, through Life Science Express, into like a clinical, like a TMF document, then that experience so the way that would work is you would upload a document, you would define what type of document it is. It honors, the D2 Life Science creation profile matrix, so where you classify a document, and then when you upload that document, it brings it into, from that sort of external cloud front end into your Documentum repository. So it's basically bridging the connection between your customers or business users out, from a cloud perspective, out maybe potentially, outside your network. They would have the ability to contribute information into your repository. Obviously, they need to be onboarded and connected, onboarded from a security perspective into the solution. But the whole point of having that Life Science Express interface is to provide that sort of cloud external experience, but still honor, all of the, the business processes, the document classification within the repository. So honoring the Life Science Suite creation profile matrix that Manuela touched on a little bit earlier.
Okay, thank you. And we do have another one. So you had logged in as several users. What if a user has several roles in the organization? How is this handled?
Yes, this is actually a very common scenario that like authors and reviewers are maybe the same people, or coordinators and managers are maybe the same people. And the way D2 is configured, that it is a matrix of configurations. And so there are specific functions that are roles specific, like which user interface, which workspace will be shown to the user. And for that, it will use the first one that it finds in the matrix, which will usually be the one from the author, which is the one that has most capabilities in the system. Most of the other functions are just on top of each other, so are just add-ons that more functionalities will be made available for the users. But there are just a few where pretty much a decision has to be made because there can be only one configuration, like for the workspace, for example, but that's really the exception. So in most cases, just the user will get all the abilities that the different roles have in the system.
Okay, thanks, Manuela. I don't see anything additional right now, so we'll give folks another minute, but we are coming up on the hour. So actually with that, if there are any additional questions, you can reach us at info@fme-us.com. So feel free and send us an email, and we would be happy to answer the questions that you may have. So we will, we're 3 minutes early, so we'll give the time back to you. And thank you, Frank. Thank you, Manuela, for an excellent presentation and demonstration today. So wishing everyone a good day. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Larissa. Thanks, everyone.